in hand, you and me. Hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh.
Hey, oh, hey,
Hey, we are with it, oh. Hey, oh, hey. Hey, we are with it, oh. Hey, oh, hey. Hey, oh, hey. Hey, we are with it, oh. Hey, oh, hey. Hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, oh. Remember me, when the sun comes up in the morning sky. There I will be, soaring with the eagle so high, feeling free. Remember me, down the road, hand in hand, you and me. Hey-oh, hey-oh, hey-oh.
hey, oh,
Hey, we are hey-oh, hey-oh, hey. Hey, we are hey-oh, hey-oh, hey. Hey-oh, hey. Hey, we are hey-oh, hey-oh, hey. Hey-oh, hey-oh, hey-oh. Remember me, when the sun comes up in the morning sky. There I will be, soaring with the eagle so high, feeling free. Remember me, down the road, hand in hand, you and me. Hi-yo, hey-yo, hey-yo.
Hello, everyone. National Labor Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. The AARC, founded in 2000, is one of 4 ethnic resource centers at UC Santa Cruz. Our mission is to support the needs of American Indian students and increase Native visibility on campus by advocating student-centered programs, culture events, and tools for academic success and well-being. Throughout the year, we host speakers, workshops, and presentations that raise awareness about issues that pertain to the Native community. We are glad to be joined by you all this evening. We're going to begin our event with the land acknowledgement delivered by our intern, Kamiko Holster.
UC Santa Cruz is located on the unceded territory of the Awaswa-speaking UP tribe. The Amamutsan tribal band, comprised of the descendants of indigenous people taken to missions Santa Cruz and San Juan Bautista during Spanish colonization of the Central Coast, is today working hard to restore traditional stewardship practices on these lands and heal from historical trauma.
We would now like to introduce the members of the AIRC team joining us tonight. I am Dr. Hernandez. I'm Mescalero in Warm Springs Apache. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the director of the American Indian Resource Center.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gemsy Ortiz, and I am Northern Cheyenne, Lakota Sioux, and Blackfeet. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the program coordinator for the AIRC.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Lang. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the graduate student intern for the AIRC.
Hello, my name is Amanda Collins, and I am Muskogee Creek. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a third-year student intern at the ARC.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah. My name is Sarah Zamerilai. I'm a Paiute, Pomo, and Shoshone native. I'm enrolled with the Lovelock Paiute tribe in Nevada. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a second-year student intern.
Hi y'all, my name is Julia Gavin and I am Danette and Blackfeet. I use she, her pronouns and I'm a first-year student intern.
Hello, everyone. My name is Desiree Morse. I'm Danette. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a second-year intern.
Hello, my name is Kamiko Hostler and I am a member of the Hoopa Valley tribe. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a first-year student intern.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kai Valentin Borunda. I use he, him pronouns, and I work at the Lionel Cantu Career Resource Center. I'm also the trans education specialist here at UC Santa Cruz, and I'm so happy to be here with you all, and I'm super thankful for the invitation to be one of your presenters tonight.
Oh, hi everyone. My name is Sherry Tran. I use she, her pronouns. I'm one of the community support interns for the CARE office, and I'm here to provide a brief intro of our CARE services and how myself and an advocate will be providing support for you all during this event. So CARE is a confidential resource on campus that provides support services, resources, and prevention education for sexual violence, dating, domestic violence, and stalking, which are forms of interpersonal violence. We serve students, both undergrad and graduate, staff, and faculty. CARE has two different parts of the house, one of which is intervention through advocacy services. What advocacy services look like are a meeting one-on-one with an advocate from CARE that will help you with knowing your rights and options, helping you with the reporting process if you choose to do so, as well as emotional support and accommodations, which could look like housing accommodations, academic accommodations, just to name a few. Our services are 100% free and confidential, which means that we won't tell anyone, whether that's family, friends, police, or Title IX, unless you explicitly give us permission to. And ultimately, the goal is to meet your needs. The other side of CARE is our prevention education side, which is done through peer-to-peer workshops and trainings that our interns put on for folks. Some of the workshops that prevention education puts on are gender-based violence, bystander intervention, ending rape culture, consent 101, and supporting survivors. We also have our quarterly ambassador training, which trains and educates folks on how to raise awareness of and end violence in their communities. Community support, which is the team that I'm a part of, is a mix of both services. So as a team, we go out into the community and provide emotional support at events relating to the work that our office does, like today's event for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. I'm here to provide emotional support for y'all during this event, as well as Kelsey, who is one of our advocates at CARE and is also the director. You can contact us through the separate Zoom link that's posted right there on the slide. And you can also call, for longer term services, you can call or visit our website at care.ucsc.edu or our number at 831-502-2273. We're offering all of our services remotely, and our advocates are prepared to support your needs. I just want to say thank you again to the ARC for inviting us into your space, and I just want to recognize the important and difficult work that you are all doing to raise awareness for this issue and to end the violence experienced in Indigenous communities. We want you to know that CARE stands in solidarity with you all, and I really hope that we can meet the needs of your community for this event and beyond.
Thank you, Sherry and Kelsey, for being here with us tonight to support our audience. So here's what our schedule looks like for tonight's event. We ask that everyone disables their video and mutes their mics in order to minimize distractions and disruptions during the presentation. Tonight's event will be recorded and shared on our social media. The chat function on Zoom can be used to send questions to the person named Submit Questions Here anytime during the event. There are Q&A sessions scheduled throughout, so we'll be able to answer your questions. Throughout the presentation, we are sharing various video clips, so please forgive the abrupt endings to some of those. And with that, we'll get started with the introductory presentation from Gemzy and Sarah.
So we're going to wait for the slides to pop up on the screen real quick.
Apologies in advance for any technology issues. This is our third virtual event in 2 weeks, so we're getting used to this. There we go. So we'll start now.
Awesome. Okay. So in this first part of the event, Gemzy and I are going to talk about what MMIWG is and the origins of both the epidemic and the movement. We'll then discuss statistics, issues of jurisdiction, advocates in Indian country, and finally, we'll talk about a few organizations and social media pages you can follow for additional resources and updates. But before we go forward with the presentation, we would like to do a content warning. Everything we will talk about in this presentation is very sensitive and can be triggering. We're going to cover topics of sexual assault and violence towards women. For that reason, we urge you to take care of yourselves. So if you need to exit the Zoom call at any time, please do so. If you need someone to talk to, Sherry and Kelsey from the UCSC Care Office are here to support us. You can meet with either of them via Zoom. They will be available throughout the event and are offering one-on-one meetings and confidential services. Let's see, the Zoom meeting ID and link are now posted in the chat if you need to access it at any point during the event. We'd also like to disclose that today's information that we'll present to you is in no way exhaustive. MMIWG is an extremely complicated and complex issue, and there's no way for us to fit everything into the 90 minutes that we have here today, but we hope to provide y'all with enough information that you'll be able to go out into your own communities and spread awareness about MMIWG. I will now turn it over to Gemzy to kick off our presentation.
Thanks, Sarah. So hello, everyone, again. I want to first acknowledge the pain that may come up for myself, for my team, and for you, our guests. This topic is important to us in our community, and it's important for all of us to be educated so we can combat it together. So I want to thank you for being with us tonight. I also want to honor the spirit of my cousin, Keana Odyssey Gonzalez. She is with me tonight. Nish. So we're gonna go over some acronyms that are being used when we're discussing the movement. You may have seen some on social media, in articles, press releases, or maybe you've never seen them. So MMIW stands for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women. MMIWG stands for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. The AIRC prefers to use this acronym. MMIWG2S stands for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, and Two-Spirit People. We'll go into depth about Two-Spirit People in a later presentation. MMIWG2ST stands for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, Two-Spirit, and Trans People. This acronym recognizes the violence that is being committed against our trans relatives at a high rate, and it also offers a distinction between trans and Two-Spirit people, as these two identities are not the same. MMIP stands for Missing and Murdered Indigenous People. This acronym recognizes that Native men experience high rates of murder by police and face higher rates of violent victimization than any other race. MMIR stands for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives. This is being used to demonstrate that Native people are all related and that we are all being affected by this.
So now we're going, oh, okay, there we go. Now we're going to talk about how the National Day of Awareness came about. So in 2018, the US Senate unanimously passed a resolution to make May 5th the National Day of Awareness for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. The resolution was introduced by Senator Steve Daines, who represents the state of Montana. The resolution seeks to honor the memory of Hannah Harris, a Northern Cheyenne woman from Lame Deer, Montana, who was found on the powwow grounds of the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. She was only 21 years old and a mother to her then 10-month-old son. The resolution also seeks to commemorate other missing and murdered American Indian and Alaska Native women in the United States. The date for the National Day of Awareness is May 5th because May 5th is Hannah's birthday. Today, she should have turned 28 years old. Catherine Sullivan, the director of the Office on Violence Against Women, says, quote, "This observance shines a light on the high rates of homicide of Native American and Alaska Native women affecting Native communities throughout the United States. And with this event, we hope to do our part in raising awareness about MMIWG." Now, activism and this great push to raise awareness for MMIWG didn't start in the United States. The movement originally started in Canada. Canada is home to the Highway of Tears, which is a stretch of highway in British Columbia that passes through rural regions of the province. It is known for the number of Indigenous women and girls who have gone missing or have been murdered along this highway. There are 23 First Nations that border the Highway of Tears out of the 634 First Nations in the country of Canada. Additionally, official reports estimate that over 1,200 Indigenous women and girls have gone missing in Canada in the last 40 years. The community, however, puts that estimate at over triple the number. From what we've read, a major catalyst of the MMIWG movement was the death of Tina Fontaine, a 15-year-old girl from the Sag King First Nation in Manitoba. She went missing in July of 2014 and was found a month later at the bottom of the Red River in Winnipeg, over 280 miles away from her home and her family. She was wrapped in plastic and a duvet cover and weighed to the bottom of the river with rocks. Her suspected murderer, a white man whose name I will not say, was acquitted by a jury in February of 2018, despite tapes, literal evidence of him referencing her murder and stating that he threw her in the river. A month after the final verdict, prosecutors decided they would not allow the case to be appealed for re-examination. Another case where the victim and her family do not get justice. And it was after reading Tina's case that our center decided to use the acronym MMIWG, as Jemsy mentioned earlier, because sexual assaults and sexual violence are not only committed against Native women, but Native girls as young as Tina and girls even younger than her. So after much activism from the First Nations people, and it took a lot of work, the Canadian government declared MMIWG a national epidemic and met the First Nation people's demand to conduct a national inquiry. It was conducted from September 2016 to December 2018. The results of the inquiry found that persistent and deliberate Indigenous rights violations and abuses are the root cause of the high rates of violence against Indigenous women, girls, Two-Spirit, and queer people. The national inquiry is also available online for those of you who would like to read through it. It's quite lengthy. Okay. Though the MMIWG movement has its roots in Canada, we must acknowledge that sexual assault and sexual violence has been committed against Native women since first contact with the European invaders. In her book, The Beginning and End of Rape, Sarah Deer critiques the use of the word epidemic when describing the high rates of violence that Native women suffer. Now, she recognizes it's sort of a flashy word. It really catches your attention. Deer even admits to using the word herself, but here are a couple of quotes from the introduction of her book that explain why epidemic is not a very accurate description of what's happening. She says, quote, "Using the word epidemic deflects responsibility because it fails to acknowledge the agency of perpetrators and those who allow the problem to continue." She goes on to say the word suggests that violence against Native women is a, quote, "short-term isolated problem," and that it allows society to absolve itself of blame. Deer says, quote, "The word suggests that the problem originated independent of long-standing oppression." The last point she makes is that, quote, "Rape in the lives of Native women is not an epidemic of recent mysterious origin. Instead, rape is a fundamental result of colonialism, a history of violence reaching back centuries." This is a short clip of Sarah Deer speaking at a symposium last year held at the National Museum of the American Indian in Washington, D.C. So we'll listen to that now. Kamiko, the volume is down. We can't hear it. It's still down. There's still no noise.
Kamiko, try unmuting yourself.
Also, maybe taking your headphones out. Let me just mention that.
My favorite story from the 19th century about Native women is this wonderful figure named Sarah Winnemucca. And Sarah Winnemucca was a Paiute woman who was a truth teller. And she was trying to raise money for a school for her children, the children of the Paiute people. She had some wealth and she had some knowledge. She spoke 5 languages, as far as those are the ones we know about. And she decided to try to raise money on the East Coast from sympathetic white East Coaster people. I don't know if that's a word, East Coast people. So she dressed up in her regalia. Sometimes the white organizers of her lectures called her a princess, which was not true, but she said, whatever I can get in the door with. But what was so powerful about Sarah Winnemucca is that she wrote a book. She was the first Native woman in the United States to write a book. It's called Life Among the Paiutes, and it's still available today. In fact, it's out of copyright, so you can actually get free versions online. And her story, is nonfiction work called Life Among the Paiutes, The Wrongs and Claims, was a detailed book about everything that had been done to her people, everything that she had seen done to her people as a result of colonial power and control. And what's so powerful about this book is that Sarah Winnemucca in 1883 is writing explicitly about sexual violence being perpetrated against her people, her sisters, her aunts, the community. And I find that inspirational because in 1883, it wasn't safe for white women to be talking about rape and sexual assault. And yet here we have a Native woman, one of the most marginalized faces on the continent, who is not only speaking about it, but writing about it as well. And that gives me hope. In fact, one of the things I have found frustrating in my work as a former rape crisis worker myself is that we often, when I would get trained this was back in the 1990s, I was taught and told that the rape crisis movement in the United States began in the late 1960s or early 1970s. And now that I know about Sarah Winnemucca and other women like her, I want to reclaim that and say the rape crisis movement in this country began with Native women who spoke out and wrote about our experiences.
So, issues of jurisdiction play a significant role in perpetrating MMIWG. There are currently 574 federally recognized tribes in the US, all of which are sovereign nations. This means they have their own government and laws. Now, because tribes are sovereign nations, this creates a scenario in which the FBI, tribal police, and state police are competing over jurisdiction over cases. I must emphasize that this is a major oversimplification of tribal law. And if you'd like a visual of the issues of jurisdiction, our team has agreed that the movie Wind River, though difficult to watch, does a good job of demonstrating this. Here we have a landmark case and two pieces of legislation that contribute to the complexity of tribal law and the issues of jurisdiction. In 1885, the Major Crimes Act was passed by the United States government. This act gave the federal government jurisdiction over cases involving murder, manslaughter, rape, assault with the intent to kill, arson, burglary, and larceny. So if a Native person commits one of these crimes, the case is in the jurisdiction of the federal government. This act took authority away from tribal courts. In 1978, the case of Oliphant versus the Suquamish Indian tribe determined that tribal courts do not have inherent criminal jurisdiction to try and punish non-Indians, and that they may not assume such jurisdiction unless specifically authorized by Congress. Again, authority is being taken away from tribal courts. And finally, in 1953, Congress enacted Public Law 280, which enabled states to assume criminal and civil jurisdiction over cases in Indian country. Previous to the enactment of Public Law 280, these matters were dealt with in either tribal and/or federal court. So this was essentially a transfer of power from federal to state government. And once again, authority is being taken away from tribal courts. Public Law 280 is not implemented in every state in the country. Congress mandatorily implemented this law in Alaska, California, Minnesota, Oregon, and Wisconsin. This chart from the Tribal Law and Order Commission gives us a visual of how to go about determining the jurisdiction of a case in a state under Public Law 280. We want to highlight the right portion of the chart. As you can see, when a non-native offender commits a crime against a native person, the case is within the jurisdiction of the state. Public Law 280 is both a controversial and complicated statute, and it has often been misunderstood and misapplied by both federal and state governments.
With all these complications, it's obvious that the system is broken and in need of great reform, because while lawyers and FBI agents and state police and tribal police are all trying to determine which one of them has jurisdiction over a case, families of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls are caught in this exhausting cycle, one where receiving justice for their mother or daughter or sister seems nearly impossible because of all the legal technicalities.
So we're now going to share some statistics. The aim of this is to show you the magnitude of this problem and for you to understand the devastating impact this is having on Native communities. We already know that our health and safety are not prioritized, but these numbers demonstrate that. 4 in 5 Native women have experienced violence in their lifetime. Native women face murder rates 10 times the national average. Murder is the 3rd leading cause of death for Native girls ages 10 to 24, and the 6th leading cause of death for Native women ages 25 to 34. Please note that murder is not even in the top 10 leading causes of death for white women. Their leading causes of death include health-related issues like cancer, heart disease, and diabetes. 5,712 cases of MMIWG were reported in 2016, but only 116 of them were logged into the Department of Justice Missing Person database. Natives only make up 1.5% of the population in the United States, but represent 5% of missing person cases in the US. 75% of crimes investigated in Indian country involve homicide, rape, violent assaults, and child abuse. 95% of MMIWG cases are never covered by national or international media. 97% of Native women who are victims of sexual assault experience this violence at the hands of non-Native perpetrators. Keep in mind, some of these statistics are outdated and do not fully represent the true numbers because of issues of underreporting. Also, many mixed natives are not counted as American Indians by law enforcement. Not to mention, there is not a singular database that consistently tracks an accurate number of MMIWG cases. There needs to be significant social and legal change if we want justice for the women that we have lost and to protect future generations of Native women and girls.
Thank you, Gemsy. She's right, snaps to that. If we want justice, if we want to protect our sisters, we must fight on every front, social and political. And now we are going to highlight the work of activists who pushed for the following legislation to be passed in their states. We have some really great politicians who are working with the Native community to write these laws and who are fighting at the state and national levels to get them passed. First, we have the Tribal Law and Order Act of 2010. This act helps to address crime in tribal communities, putting emphasis on decreasing violence against American Indian and Alaska Native women. It also encourages the hiring of more law enforcement officers for Indian lands and enhances tribes' authority to prosecute and punish criminals. The reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act in 2013 recognizes tribes' inherent power to exercise jurisdiction over defendants who commit acts of domestic violence or dating violence or violate certain protection orders in Indian country. Savannah's Act of 2018, also known as the #MMIW Act, was named after Savannah Graywind, a woman of the Spirit Lake Nation in North Dakota. It directs the Department of Justice to review, revise, and develop law enforcement and justice protocols to address missing and murdered Native Americans. It calls for annual meetings between U.S. attorneys and Indian tribes to discuss sexual violence against Native women. It provides new training and technical assistance for tribal police, and it also requires that a new database be created in order for the U.S. to collect accurate data on MMIWG cases. Savannah's Act was finally passed in the Senate this past March. And lastly, we have Arizona House Bill 2570, which calls for the creation of a study committee on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, which would be made up of 21 people. The committee will consist of law enforcement officers, Arizona's Native American tribes, family members of the missing and murdered, and victim advocates. This act was also passed with unanimous support just last year.
Hannah's Act of 2019 was named after Hannah Harris, one of my Northern Cheyenne sisters, whom we discussed earlier. It authorizes the state's Justice Department to assist with the investigation of all missing person cases and to employ a specialist who would act as a liaison between families and law enforcement agencies. The Not Invisible Act of 2019 calls for the increase of intergovernmental coordination to identify and combat violent crimes within Indian lands and of Indians. For instance, this act would establish an advisory committee on violent crime comprised of law enforcement, tribal leaders, federal partners, service providers, and survivors to make recommendations to the Department of Interior and Department of Justice. It is the first bill in history to be introduced by 4 enrolled members of federally recognized tribes. It was introduced by Representatives Deb Haaland of the Pueblo of Laguna, Tom Cole of the Chickasaw Nation in Oklahoma, Sharice Davids of the Ho-Chunk Nation in Wisconsin, and Mark Wayne Mullen of the Cherokee Nation. Washington House Bill 1713, also known as the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Bill, passed unanimously, and like the Not Invisible Act, it will increase intergovernmental coordination to identify and combat violent crime within Indian lands and of Indians. Oklahoma House Bill 3345, Ida's Law, aims to create a tribal liaison within the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation to investigate MMIWG cases.
Okay. We now want to highlight a few Native women who are making absolute power moves, working to pass legislation and collect and share data. These women are using their platforms from the Senate floor to college classrooms to the racetrack to spread awareness about MMIWG and the high rates of violence Native women face.
Deb Haaland is a member of the Laguna Pueblo tribe and congresswoman representing the 1st District of New Mexico. Even before her election, Holland was advocating for the MMIWG campaign. From promoting the hashtag Why We Wear Red campaign to publishing her national opinion piece on the MMIWG crisis, Holland has made the protection of Indigenous women a top priority in her campaigns. Teaming up with her fellow Congresswoman Sharice Davids, she continuously works to pass legislation that will advance the rights of Native women and bring justice to those who have passed or disappeared. Sharice Davids, a member of the Ho-Chunk Nation, was sworn into the 116th Congress, becoming one of the first 2 Native American women to serve in Congress. She represents the 3rd District of Kansas. She has supported MMIWG campaigns across the nation, including the Global Indigenous Council's Billboard campaign to spread awareness of MMIWG. Davids is also fighting for a national inquiry to be conducted in the United States, similar to Canada's.
Anita Lucchese is of Southern Cheyenne descent. She is the founder and executive director of the Sovereign Bodies Institute. Lucchese is also a PhD student at the University of Lethbridge in Alberta, Canada. She has numerous works in progress on the intersections of mapping technologies, Indigenous data sovereignty, colonial sexual violence, and MMIWG. Her current dissertation research examines how data on Indigenous women's and girls' bodies and the violence perpetrated against them mirrors historical colonialism and the desecration of native lands. Next, we have Abigail Echohawk, who is a member of the Pawnee Nation in Oklahoma. She is the director of the Seattle Urban Indian Health Institute and the chief research officer for the Seattle Indian Health Board. Echohawk works on policy advocacy for maternal and child health, domestic violence, sexual assaults, and health disparities. She aims to use her research to increase the visibility of Native women and girls at the state and federal level using Indigenous-informed methodologies as well as high scientific rigor. Echohawk and Lucchese collaborated with each other to compile the data that made up the Urban Indian Health Institute's report on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. The report is available online if you'd like to read through it. We also used it to pull some of the statistics that we read to you earlier. And here we have Sarah Deer, who is a member of the Muskogee Creek Nation. She is an author, lawyer, and professor of women, gender, and sexuality studies at the University of Kansas. She was instrumental in the passage of the 2010 Tribal Law and Order Act and the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act in 2013 that we talked about earlier. Deer also co-authored with Bonnie Claremont Amnesty International's 2007 report called The Maze of Injustice. This report documented sexual assault against Native American women. Today, Deer is a MacArthur Fellow and an inductee into the National Women's Hall of Fame. Okay, next we have Jordan Marie Daniel, who is a member of the Lower Brule Sioux tribe. She is a long-distance runner who uses her running platform to raise awareness about MMIWG. If some of you saw on Instagram today, she ran her 26 miles in honor of MMIWG. She is most known for her participation in the 2019 Boston Marathon, during which she had a red hand painted over her face along with the letters MMIW painted down her leg in honor of missing and murdered Indigenous women. She ran 26 miles that day and stopped at each mile to recite the name of a Native woman who had been missing or was murdered and pray for them. She continues this practice today for all her races. Also, just a little fun fact, Jordan's time for the Boston Marathon in 2019 was 3 hours, 2 minutes, and 33 seconds, which was 33 minutes faster than her time in 2016. She is a remarkable person, and I know many of us on our team look up to her. She is also a role model and has been an inspiration for young Native women and girls like Rosalie Fish. Rosalie, a member of the Cowlitz tribe, is a track and field runner who has personally experienced the disappearance and death of Native women in her family. When she was just 3 years old, her aunt disappeared from home and was later found in a creek. As the talented and only runner of her high school, Muckleshoot Tribal School, Fish decided she wanted to make a difference and raise awareness for the MMIWG movement. After hearing about Jordan and the Boston Marathon, Fish followed in her footsteps and ran with the red handprint on her face and body at her state championship meet in Washington State. That day, she ran for the members of her family and community who had disappeared or been murdered. Rosalie ended up placing first in 3 of the 4 races she competed in. Her plan is to continue using her running platform to spread awareness for MMIWG in college.
These are some amazing organizations we recommend you all follow and support. They're doing great work in Indian country to educate others and spread awareness. MMIW USA offers education and self-defense workshops, and their mission is to bring home our sisters and offer support to their family members. Restoring Ancestral Winds works to educate Indigenous communities on issues around stalking, domestic, sexual, family, and dating violence. The Sovereign Bodies Institute, led by Anita Lucchese, builds on Indigenous traditions of data gathering and knowledge transfer to create, disseminate, and put into action research on gender and sexual violence against Indigenous people. The National Indigenous Women's Resource Center is a Native-led nonprofit organization dedicated to ending violence against Native women and children. They provide national leadership in ending gender-based violence in tribal communities by lifting up the collective voices of grassroots advocates and offering culturally grounded resources, technical assistance and training, and policy development to strengthen tribal sovereignty. The Urban Indian Health Institute, led by Abigail Echohawk, is a tribal epidemiology center that conducts research and evaluation, collects and analyzes data, and provides disease surveillance to strengthen the health of American Indian and Alaska Native communities. They also stress and practice the decolonization of data to ensure that Native communities have access to accurate data that better reflects the unique cultures, traditions, and health needs of urban Indian communities. The Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women aims to stop violence against Native women and children by advocating for social change in our communities. This organization provides support and education to Native advocates working in domestic violence, sexual assault, dating violence, stalking, and sex trafficking.
Here we have some recommended social media accounts for you all to follow if you'd like to stay updated on the movement. We have Rising Hearts, the Three Sisters Collective, Indigenous Rising, MMIW, Who is Missing, Native Women Running, Indigenous Intentions, Red Dress Warriors, and the Red House series. Please keep in mind that there are so many other accounts and organizations you can follow to stay updated on current events regarding MMIWG. This is just our team's short list of recommended pages. If anyone in the audience has any other recommendations for organizations or social media pages to follow, please send them to us in the chat to the person named Submit Questions here, and we'll share them with everyone afterward in an email. So that concludes the introductory portion of the event. Thank you to everyone who tuned in. We will now hold time and space for folks to ask questions. If you have any questions for our team, please submit them to the person named Submit Questions here. We'll get through as many as we can, and we'll try to answer your questions to the best of our abilities. If not, we'll get ready for the next presentation. Thank you. Okay, Gemzy, we have a couple of questions. The first question is, what else can we do as allies? Well, I will say that following the social media accounts, staying updated with the movement is a great way to support. Also, attending events like these. You know, there are a lot of other events y'all could have been at today because everybody, you know, everybody's doing great work today and in preparation for May 5th. Also, a couple things you could do is wear red on May 5th. That's like a thing that you do for May 5th to spread awareness for MMIWG. You could also, you know, when we're not present as Native people in a room, in a classroom or something, speaking up for us. You know, when you attend events like this, you learn a little bit more about what's going on in our community. And, you know, we're not always in those spaces that some people are privileged enough to be in. So just speaking up for us and being our allies, that's the greatest thing you can do. I'll let Gemsy speak now if she'd like.
Yeah, that's a good question that a lot of people, I'm glad people are asking. So I think we mentioned those laws that are being written and trying to be passed. Look into your local area, see if your state if there's legislation being written in your state, call your representatives. Getting involved on a political level is super important as well. And it's important for us to have allies that are ready to fight for us because we can't always be everywhere, you know? So speaking up for us in spaces that we aren't in or that we aren't able to, that's the most important thing you can do. Bringing it up if somebody, I don't know, just making sure that our voices are being heard, either if you're bringing it up for us when we're not there or you're uplifting our own voices, it's greatly appreciated.
So our next question is, I am wondering what it was like planning this event. And I feel like anyone on our team can answer this question as well. I think for me personally, it's kind of hard to plan this event because you have to read through all the reports and all the articles and stuff. And so I think that's the hardest part for me. Leading up to the event, you know, you feel sort of drained. But we know that we're doing great work and we know that our work we're spreading awareness, which is our main goal. So yeah, it's hard, but we know that it's necessary. And I'll let somebody else speak if they'd like.
Yeah, this is our second time hosting this event. First time being online, so there was a learning curve with all of this going on. So, but we knew it was important to keep this event and to honor our sisters. And so, you know, like Sarah said, it's hard to do, but we know it's important, and we want, one of the objectives of our center is to educate, and so educate people of our issues that are going on. And this is something that's affecting all of our communities and something that needs to be talked about and something people need to be educated on. So it was hard on us, but it's important for us to be speaking up for our sisters. So it's important and we're happy to do it for sure.
Mm-hmm. So our next question is, as staff who work with middle school students, what resources would you recommend us share or topics we can talk about with teens to make them aware of such issues? Wow. That's a good question because the content should have like an age restriction on it because there's a lot of graphic details when you talk about an issue like this. I would say starting off at the one organization we talked about, the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center. They have a lot of great resources for people who are looking to learn more. They have links to presentations that they've hosted. I know I watched one with Sarah Deer where she gave a PowerPoint presentation that was really awesome and informative. They have links to different artwork that people do. They have links to other organizations like the ones we talked about, Sovereign Bodies Institute, Urban Indian Health Institute. So that's a great website. That's a great place to start to look for content to share with your students. Does anybody else have anything to say?
I think you got it, Sarah.
Okay.
I think that was a good answer.
Okay.
And that's a hard question because it's, you want to protect them and you want to, but you want to make sure that they're being educated about it too. So I think just, I mean, but they're also not like, they're in middle school, right? So I'm sure they've seen some violent things. I'm sure they've heard about it. So, you know, just taking the approach of taking care of themselves and making sure that they're supported when you're sharing about it. That's something that we've all tried to do within our team. Is just make sure that that we're all supported when we're talking about this stuff.
Okay. Our next question is, will it ever come to pass when tribes can persecute non-native offenders that will require major changes to the court system? Yeah, it would. It would require major changes to the court system. Because as we mentioned earlier, there are a lot of issues of jurisdiction, a lot of landmark cases and legislation that were passed a long time ago that still apply today and that are still used in tribal courts and the federal courts and the state courts today, which makes it hard for for the tribes to persecute non-native offenders. But we are grateful for the Native politicians and even the non-native politicians who are working with the Native communities to pass legislation like the ones we talked about earlier. But we hope so. We hope it comes to pass one day that the tribes can persecute non-natives.
Our next question is, I am not Native or Indigenous, and I'm wondering if referring to Native folks as anything else when you're not Native is seen as offensive. We do get this question a lot. Thank you for it. Calling us American Indians, Indigenous, Native American is fine. It's always best to check in with that person and see, hey, how do you identify, or like, how do you want to be called? Most people are fine with interchanging of the terms. Using our specific tribes, if you know it, is the best way to identify someone, though. That is always the best option.
I don't have anything else to add. That was a great answer, Gemsy. Our next question is, it says, thank you for your work. I wanted to ask how I might, as a male and father, best raise awareness with my male peers about this critical issues. That's a great question. I would say share about what you learned today. Refer folks to our website. We share a lot of great information there. Also checking out the resources that we shared in the presentation as well. But yeah, our men are great allies, especially with regard to this movement. So we appreciate you for asking this question and wanting to learn more. Gemsy, if you have anything else to add.
No, I think what you said, Sarah, was best. I think, yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. So our next question is, who is your MMIWG hero? And I think that's like our favorite advocate, maybe? That's how I'm going to take the question, Sarah, because I know you have so many favorites.
Yeah, I mean, basically everybody we mentioned in the presentation. Sarah Deer is a big one for me. In one of my classes, I read a lot of her work. So I was glad to include her in today's presentation. Also, Rosalie Fish and Jordan Daniel, they're huge inspirations to me because they're not, because they're using their social platforms to raise awareness. And I think that's so beautiful and it's so inspiring. And that's why I think we choose to do this work as well, as using our own platform to raise awareness because it's necessary. So those are just a few. I won't go on too long. Gemsy, if you have any to add.
Yeah, I'll definitely add in our Congresswomen, Deb Haaland and Sharice Davids. They are so cool. Like, wow, they're just amazing. I also want to shout out my tribe, the Northern Cheyenne tribe, because Hannah Harris was a Northern Cheyenne woman, and her family and my tribe and the Crow Nation, which is the tribe right next door, they're like, go back generations of not liking each other, and they came together to fight for Hannah and to make Hannah's Law into a thing. So those are my heroes. They had a rally last year, and the images from that were really powerful. To see my tribal president with the red handprint on her face was super moving.
Yeah, I remember seeing those pictures. We included a couple of those pictures in our pre-event slideshow as well. They're really powerful. Yeah, so somebody says, this is not a question, but a resource regarding what men can do. There is an organization called, quote, Moose Hide Campaign in Canada. So for the person who asked what men can do for MMIWG, Moose Hide Campaign in Canada.
All right, so we're gonna move on to the next presentation. Cool. So this is Julia and Kai.
So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hi, y'all. My name is Julia, and I use she, her pronouns. I am joined by Cantu Queer Center staff member and UCSC Trans Education Specialist Kai for a presentation on missing and murdered Indigenous Two-Spirit people. Prior to our presentation, Kai is going to tell you a bit about the Cantu's resources.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kai Valentin Borunda. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the trans education specialist here at UC Santa Cruz. So I'm gonna tell y'all a little bit about what we do at the Lionel Cantu Queer Resource Center. So the Cantu Resource Center is a resource for all LGBTQIA plus people here at the University of California, Santa Cruz. And our aim is to create co-curricular experiences for students, for staff, and for faculty. One of the goals is to build a more inclusive campus community with and for all of our queer and trans people. One of the ways that we do this is by providing educational resources like programming, workshops, and engaging in critical dialogues like this event tonight. If you'd like to learn more about what we do and what resources we offer, I encourage you to follow our Instagram account, which is at Cantu Queer Center, or visit us at queer.ucsc.edu.
Thank you. So today, Kai and I will be discussing the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls epidemic in terms of the Two-Spirit community.
Yeah, so before we begin talking about this topic, we'd first like to define the term Two-Spirit. So though Two-Spirit is now included under the umbrella of LGBTQ+, the term Two-Spirit does not simply refer to someone who's Native American or Alaska Native and gay. Actually, traditionally Native American Two-Spirit people were male, female, and sometimes intersex people who combined activities of both men and women with traits unique to their identity as Two-Spirit people. In most tribes, they weren't men or women. They occupied a distinct third gender status. And so I say all of this to stress that the term Two-Spirit encompasses both gender expression, gender embodiment, and sexual orientation.
And I'd also like to direct you towards the disclaimer. So with over 500 surviving Native American cultures, attitudes about sexuality and gender can be very diverse. Even with the modern adoption of pan-Indian terms like Two-Spirit, not all cultures perceive Two-Spirit people the same way or welcome a pan-Indian term to replace the terms that were already in use by their cultures. And so I'd also like to direct you toward the chart on the next slide, which highlights just a few of the many terms used by different tribes to describe their third gender label.
All right, thanks, Julia. So to help y'all understand more about about Two-Spirit people, we wanted to show you a short clip of an inquiry video entitled "What Does Two-Spirit Mean?"
Two-Spirit refers to another gender role believed to be common among most, if not all, First Peoples of Turtle Island, North America. One that had a proper and accepted place within Native societies. This acceptance was rooted in the spiritual teachings that say all life is sacred. So how did the term Two-Spirit first come about? In 1990, in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, at the 3rd annual Native American Gay and Lesbian Gathering, the term Two-Spirit was proposed and affirmed by consensus. The word was a potential solution to what Native scholars and activists called the problem of naming, or making the many different sexual and gender identities that fall under the Two-Spirit umbrella legible across Native and non-Native cultures alike. For example, to illustrate the diversity of meanings that Two-Spirit contains, consider the following. In Lakota, the word winkte means to be as a woman and refers to two-souled Lakota people who transgress boundaries of gender from what may be considered male to female. In Dene, nadlehe means those who transform and refers to one of 4 separate genders: masculine-feminine, masculine-masculine, feminine-masculine, and feminine-feminine. Each gender has its own word in the Dene language. And those are just 2 nation-specific examples. There are so many more. Each nation's understanding of gender and sexual diversity is different and grounded in specific spiritual beliefs. Although all nations don't have a concept of Two-Spirit people, across those indigenous nations that do, Two-Spirit people were historically held in high regard and often considered sacred or divine, holding important positions like matchmakers, medicine people, or warriors on the front lines of battle. Many Two-Spirit people perform roles traditionally assigned to both men and women. Witwa, a famous Two-Spirit of the Zuni or Ihamana, was known to take part in masculine tribal matters and feminine tribal matters, and was even sent as an official Zuni delegate to Washington, D.C. Part of the reason Two-Spirit was adopted at the 1990 conference was because much of the written record on the indigenous nations of North America begins with European contact. For instance, the writings of Jesuit priests from the 1600s contain references to berdaches, which means kept boy in French, to refer to those who embodied both male and female genders. These writings often focus negatively on perceived cross-dressing among the Anishinaabe. The term is not only inaccurate in that it projects a European understanding of gender, but is widely considered pejorative by natives. Two-Spirit was an attempt at self-determination across linguistic barriers, because the existing language, foreign and imposed violently on the indigenous peoples of North America, was both offensive and deeply colonial in its gaze. European colonizers imposed homophobia, rigid binary gender roles, and misogyny under the guise of civilizing indigenous people through the Christian tradition in residential schools and beyond. As a result, indigenous people were robbed not only of their land, but of their spiritual traditions and way of life regarding Two-Spirit people. Many nations came to forbid and punish Two-Spirit unions and self-expression. As recently
So the term Two-Spirit was adopted to encourage the replacement of the derogatory Jesuit term berdache, which means kept boy, as informed in the video. In many tribes, Two-Spirit people were accepted and even highly respected. However, this changed with colonization. The colonizers and missionaries, through forced assimilation efforts, changed acceptance into homophobia within many indigenous communities. Documenting this history is very challenging because behavior outside of strict Christian norms was destroyed. Thus, much of the history of Two-Spirit people and all of the similarly nuanced identities have been lost. This is just one example of the ways in which Two-Spirit people have been historically mistreated and erased.
Yeah, when Julia and I were discussing what we wanted you all to take away from this presentation, we agreed on 3 very important statements. These 3 statements are here on this slide. So the first is that the term Two-Spirit was an attempt at self-determination across linguistic barriers. The second is that Two-Spirit is not a term or identity that non-Native people should give themselves. And lastly, we wanted to stress that Two-Spirit people were historically considered sacred, holding important positions like matchmakers, medicine people, or warriors.
So, as Canada looks into the phenomenon behind missing and murdered Indigenous women, families of Two-Spirit people are often worried about being left out. In Canada, many activists and tribal political leaders have called on Prime Minister Trudeau to restructure the inquiry to center families and grassroots advocates rather than government-appointed commissioners focused on truth gathering or government hearings and legal system justice. While Canada's official efforts into researching the MMIWG Two-Spirit epidemic appears lacking, the United States government's effort is non-existent. Additionally, the only data I was able to find that addressed the way the LGBTQ and Two-Spirit community is included in the MMIWG Two-Spirit epidemic is listed here. As Gemsy and Sarah shared in their presentation, there is a lack of attention given to the MMIWG epidemic in both the United States and Canada. I found no data that focused solely on the violence committed against the Two-Spirit community in both the United States and Canada. There is no research that encapsulates the abuse committed against the greater LGBTQ Two-Spirit community. This then highlights the glaring reality that the LGBTQ Two-Spirit people are overlooked in terms of research and awareness. Missing and murdered Indigenous Two-Spirit people are completely erased from history by everyone except their loved ones and those who are aware of the epidemic. This is why it is so important to bring visibility to this issue and uplift members of the Native LGBTQ and Two-Spirit community.
Thank you, Julia. So it is always important to link the past with our present, and these slides highlight important historical and contemporary Two-Spirit activists. Their existence and advocacy and continuing to fight for representation of Two-Spirit people challenge gender norms as well as exemplify the resilience of the sacred identity. So the first person in history we're focusing on is Geo Neptune. So Geo Soctoma Neptune is Passamaquoddy, Two-Spirit master basket maker, activist, storyteller, model, and educator from Indian Township, Maine. Neptune uses they, them pronoun and joined the Idle No More movement. In addition to this, they advocate as a Two-Spirit leader for First Nations and Native American sovereignty and cultural preservation. And the second person in history we'd like to focus on is on Sharp Doppler. Sharp Doppler uses multiple pronouns and is a Two-Spirit person fighting to be included in Canada's reconciliation process. She is of Oneida, Wea, Meskwaki, and Ashkawiki, and Irish descent. After spending 16 years in the Navy, Doppler strongly identifies as a fighter. He participates in warrior dances at powwows, and when they aren't conducting sweat lodges and participating in other community ceremonies, Doppler dances in warrior regalia, which is typically reserved for men. And they're looking great in this photo. They really captured their angles. And then the third person in history we wanted to mention was Wiwa. Wiwa was Zuni Ihamana from New Mexico and the most famous Ihamana on record. In traditional Zuni culture, the Ihimana are people who are assigned male at birth and take on the social and ceremonial roles usually performed by women in their culture. So we would like to thank all of these folks, both living and those that have passed on, for their existence as well as their resistance. So in addition to featuring significant Two-Spirit community members, we'd also like to call attention to a few Native organizations that are doing great work to ensure the inclusion of Two-Spirit and trans folks within MMIWG data. So the first organization we wanted to highlight is the Bay Area American Indian Two-Spirits org, also known as BATES. We also wanted to highlight the Canadian Coalition Against LGBTQ plus Poverty. And lastly, we wanted to highlight the Native Justice Coalition MMIWG2S project.
And so in particular, a notable Canadian organization called It Starts With Us is making headway into researching and documenting the MMIWG two-spirit epidemic. Through collaboration with Native researchers and health workers, they are in the process of creating No More Silence, which is a community-run database documenting the deaths of Indigenous women, two-spirit, and trans people. In utilizing ceremony, encouraging support over shame and stigma, decolonizing gender and sexuality, and advocating for sovereignty, It Starts With Us is building their own structures independent of government and institutional funding. The purpose of their database is to honor Indigenous women and provide family members with a way to document their loved ones' passing. However, as this resource is still under construction, the data is not yet available to the public. The creation of this database also only represents Canadian two-spirit people. There is no US database that is dedicated to gathering data on the MMIWG two-spirit epidemic. Although the development of this resource does signify a move towards recognizing otherwise forgotten two-spirit people and remembering them as community members in a Native way, as opposed to just as members.
So as we conclude this presentation, we would like to provide y'all with a few resources to look into. So if you would like to learn more or get involved, make sure to check out the research guide that was emailed to you before the event.
And to end on a positive note, we'd like to show a video that highlights the diversity, resilience, and beauty of the two-spirit community.
And love and forgive. The beauty within shall shine forever. The beauty within shall shine forever. Hey, oh, hey, hey, oh. Love to be free like an eagle soaring in the sky. The beauty within shall shine forever. The beauty within shall shine forever. Hey, oh, hey, hey.
Thank you all so much for attending this very important event that highlights dialogues that we should all be having more often. For folks that are non-native like myself, I encourage us all to continue our personal work of learning more about Indigenous histories and to make a daily commitment to be better accomplices to our Native siblings. I hope we all leave this space having learned something new and ready to fight the good fight that is supporting our Native siblings. I'd also like to thank AIRC again for inviting me to be part of this event.
I'd like to thank you all for participating in this presentation. I'd also like to give a special thanks to Kai for being so supportive in creating this. As a woman who identifies as part of the LGBTQ two-spirit community, I feel that it is important to bring visibility to my community, especially as an underrepresented population. In producing this presentation, we have created a resource for a topic that is vastly under-researched. And as the audience, your presence here has contributed to the visibility of two-spirit people and the education about Native issues. Thank you for being here. We'd like to leave you with this quote by Geo Neptune. Two-spirit identity is resilient and precious. It has survived centuries of colonial violence and prejudice. And now please help us welcome our next presenter, Kamiko.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kamiko Hostler. I use she, her, hers pronouns. Today, I'm going to be talking about MMIWG inspired art from Native and non-Native artists. There are many forms of art, but we'll be covering literature, paintings, installations, songs, and dances today. First, we'll be discussing books and podcasts. Although 2 of these books are nonfiction, I decided that I would add them. I see writing as an art form. The podcast that I'm highlighting is called Who Killed Alberta Williams, which is available on iTunes if you'd like to listen. In short, this podcast discusses the tragic disappearances of 24-year-old Alberta Williams in 1989. She was found dead along the Highway of Tears near Prince Rupert, British Columbia, Canada. Police never caught her killer, and it's been 27 years since her murder, and the unsolved murder continues to haunt her family. The retired police officer who worked on her case claims that he knows who did it. It is important for people to know that cases like Alberta's are very common and are close without being solved. The next form of art I'd like to talk about is poetry. On this slide, I've picked a few poems that moved me and caught my attention. I'll read aloud the poem titled Missing by Ben Richard, Métis from the Ojibwa First Nation. Missing. A bright sunny day. Family is close. Clouds moving in. Everything turning gray. The sun is gone. It turns to evening. Clouds all apart. Now we begin. Playing games and having fun. Wait, who's missing? Ben Richard dedicated this poem to missing and murdered women and girls and to his mom, who was killed when he was only 17 years old. Poetry is a great way for individuals to express feelings and spread awareness about topics like MMIWG, as these artists have. These poems and others like them are an outlet and an opportunity for people to heal. Another way in which people are able to spread awareness about MMIWG is through movies and documentaries. A couple of documentaries that I would like to share are here on the slide. The first is called Our Sisters in Spirit. This is a short documentary about the call for a national public inquiry into the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Canada and whether there may be a better approach. Another documentary that is coming out shortly is called Somebody's Daughter. Somebody's Daughter focuses on some of the higher profile MMIWG cases, some of which were raised during the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, MMIW, MMIP hearings in December of 2018. I'll play the trailer for the documentary now.
Where we are right now is the last place that my sister was seen. It's hard. It's been a year, but it still hurts.
I have been hearing rumors from different people that my child was murdered, chopped up, put in a suitcase.
We called her Hannah Bear. A lot of people called her Hannah Montana.
We have so many cold cases here on the reservation that we have no answers to.
When somebody goes missing here, it's like everybody knows about it.
There is an awareness of the presence of the drug cartel here.
You see them, they hang out in the casinos, in the bars, just around the community.
We do know that MS-13 is here.
The reason women and children, families won't come forward is because they are scared. They're scared of retaliation against them or their families. They've been told that if they say anything, their families will be harmed or killed. There's no laws out there to keep our people safe, especially our women and our girls.
They are taking advantage of young women from reservations because they know that they're not going to have to face law because of the jurisdictional issues.
I don't know of anybody on the reservation that hasn't been victimized by this in one way or another.
The cops told me she's probably out having fun, drinking, scared to come back home. If you guys are more than welcome to go and search for her on your own. But if you guys can't find her, we'll step back in on Monday. This is the BIA that said that to me.
And if they're not gonna listen to you and they're not gonna do anything about it, we'll get up and do something about it. They not once came out to try to help us. And in doing that, we lost so much evidence. We almost didn't even have a case. We need to protect our women and our children.
These documentaries and movies support efforts to raise awareness about MMIWG and also allow people to see this is an important issue that should not be ignored. Next type of art is paintings, drawings, and installations. The first is the award-winning Red Dress Project installation by artist Jamie Black, a member of the Métis First Nation. It is an installation art project started in 2014, where Black hangs red dresses in public spaces all throughout Canada. Each red dress is representative of a missing or murdered Indigenous woman. She uses this project to give people a visual reminder of the sisters we have lost and aims to initiate a conversation about the MMIWG epidemic. The Red Dress Project has also been exhibited in museums throughout North America, including the National Museum of American Indian. The next slide has an image of a sculpture by Mary Ann Granger. The title is a memorial for MMIWG. She was infuriated by the Canadian government's treatment of Indigenous people, but Granger found hope in the call to all Canadians to carry out acts of reconciliation to help the wounds that hundreds of years of colonialism have caused. The plaque in front of the sculpture reads, "In honor of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, all of your relations love you and miss you. You are not forgotten." This third slide is an installation collage created by women who attended the first annual Sisters in Strength Wellness Retreat held in October of 2017 at Sasali Healing Lodge. This mixed media artwork is called Sisters in Strength. It was made by each woman being given a puzzle piece. They were told to create a memorial to their loved one with art supplies given to them. When putting their pieces together, they realized that it formed a heart. This collage is supposed to represent the broken hearts of MMIWG families and how, when they come together and express their sadness as a group, they build strength. At the end of the retreat, one of the participants took their collage home to imitate how family members of MMIWG live the rest of their lives with a piece missing from their heart. Next is a painting called Broken Woman by Jessica Preslow. Jessica donated this painting to Canada's National Inquiry. The inquiry was conducted from 2016 to 2018 to investigate the high rates of violence First Nations women are suffering. Jessica states that her art is a multi-dimensional expression of strength and anger and is dedicated to honoring MMIWG. This is a painting by Nani Chacon, who is Dene. It is a painting called Missing. Chacon created this painting to honor the lives and memory of the unsolved murders and missing women of North America. She chose the butterflies because in the study, she read that marked butterflies are also inexplicably dying and missing. This painting, titled Disconnected, is by Erica Richard, who is Red River Métis. She has chosen not to write a description, and instead, she encourages people to make their own interpretation of the painting. This painting is called Not Invisible by Tristan Jenny Sanderson. Sanderson made this painting for a friend, Tilly Aldrich, who lost her daughter. Ms. Aldrich says about the painting. "It does not make me sad. It doesn't make me miss her. It just empowers me to keep fighting." This is why Sanderson created the painting, to raise even more awareness for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. This installation was made out of large clay beads, and it's called Sister. It was created by Kanupa Hanska Luger, who is a member of the Mandan, Hidasta, and Arikana Nation. This artist installation is meant to bring visibility to murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. Kanupa Hanska Lugar says that every bead represents a body. There are 4,000 beads in this installation. The next form of art I will share are music and dance. For many tribes, a way in which we send up prayer is through songs. Dance is also a way in which many people have decided to honor and bring attention to MMIWG. In October of 2016, Canada's labor unions put on a moving and powerful performance with music by a tribe called Red. in a dance to honor missing and murdered Indigenous women. It includes images of girls and women who are still missing on the screen behind the dancers. I'll play a clip of the dance now. Next is the world-famous Northern Cree. Northern Cree is a powwow and round dance, drum and singing group based in Maquasis, Alberta, Canada. Here I'll play a sample of their song titled To All MMIW. The next song I will highlight today, it was composed by Antone George, a Lummi Nation tribal member of the West Coast Shore Canoe family. He presented this song that he calls a new anthem for MMIWG. He sang it at the Paddle to Lummi event. Paddle to Lummi is a canoe journey that honors the traditions of the Coast Salish tribes of the Pacific Northwest. This video clip I will play shows the community practicing the song prior to the event. The song also honors relationships and connections with the land and water. In conclusion, I want to stress that what I have shared is only a small sample of the beautiful artwork, dance, and music created to spread awareness of MMIWG. Thank you for.
Hi everyone, we're going a bit over time, so we're gonna skip the Q&A session for Julia, Kai, and Kamiko. If you have questions for them, you can email them to airc@ucsc.edu. I also put our email in the chat, and we'll get back to you.
Yes, thank you to everybody who is here today. We'd just like to let you know that tonight's event was funded by Measure 15, the UCSC Community and Resources Empowerment Measure. Because of that, we ask that you please fill out an evaluation that will be sent to your email. The link in the evaluation is now in the chat. We want to continue to ensure that our programming is serving its purpose and our community. Additionally, if you submit an evaluation form, you will be entered to win some MMIWG merchandise. We will be selecting 10 lucky people at random. Winners will be contacted via email. And furthermore, if you'd like to stay connected with our center, please follow us up on our social media accounts and subscribe to our newsletter. We are on Facebook at AIRC.UCSC, Instagram at AIRC.UCSC, and you can subscribe to our weekly newsletter by going to our official website at AIRC.UCSC.edu. Our website also has a page dedicated to MMIWG if you'd like to check it out. It is constantly being updated with resources that you can access, such as links to organizations and recommended YouTube videos. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. Take care, everybody, and now a final word from our director, Dr. Hernandez.
Well, hello, everyone. On behalf of the entire team at the UCSC American Indian Resource Center, I extend our thanks for your participation in this Zoom presentation. As you've witnessed today, our team is made up of exceptional students. Each one of them, along with our program coordinator, contributes more than their time to the work of the center. They are the heart of what we do. We represent tribes from all over the United States, and together we strive to educate our campus community, and now many people from off campus as well, about issues pertaining to Indian country. Today we share about missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls movement, one that touches us as Native women in a particularly profound way. Despite that, our team worked tirelessly to bring you this information tonight. I could not be more proud of these students. Every single day they remind me that we have a bright future because of their commitment to Indigenous people. I hope you leave today with the most important message in regard to MMIWG, that, like our ancestors, we will not surrender to violence. We will never give up. We will stand up and speak for those forever silenced, and we will never forget. Please share what you learned today with your friends and family. Let them know that they can watch this presentation on our YouTube channel, learn more about MMIWG from our website, and most importantly, as our allies, be our voice when we're not present to tell this story. Thanks again for spending this time with us. Good night.